As the echoes of the Civil War slowly faded into the valleys and cities of a wounded nation, America entered a crossroads unlike anything it had ever known. A moment where the scars of the past and the promise of the future collided to give birth to an era of unstoppable transformation. And although the Reconstruction era struggled to heal the soul of a broken republic, something extraordinary was already rising beneath the soot, dust, and noise of a rapidly changing world. A revolution of machines, invention, ambition, and unimaginable labor that would turn the United States from a fractured land of fields into a powerhouse of factories, steel, railroads, and roaring engines, all unfolding in the span of one generation. This was the rise of the industrial age, and it began not with politicians or soldiers, but with workers, millions of ordinary men, women, and children, who stepped into the darkness of mines, the heat of steel furnaces, and the thunderous floors of factories to build a new America with their bare hands. And as the 1870s dawned, the country found itself in a moment of breathtaking possibility. For while the South attempted to rebuild from the ashes of war and the North struggled to absorb waves of immigrants seeking hope, the nation as a whole was about to ignite into a frenzy of invention that would change everything from how people lived to how they worked, moved, communicated, and dreamed. Railroads stretched like steel veins across the continent, connecting east to west in ways unimaginable only decades earlier. And as iron tracks cut through mountains and deserts, towns emerged out of nothing. Goods traveled farther and faster than ever, and whole industries began rising to support the unstoppable hunger of progress. Coal fields roared to life, iron mines dug deeper than ever, and steel, thanks to innovators like Andrew Carnegie, became the backbone of a modernizing America, feeding bridges, skyscrapers, locomotives, and massive factories that could produce in hours what once took weeks or months. Inside these factories, the sounds of the industrial age became the soundtrack of a new America. Clanking gears, rumbling machines, pounding hammers, and constant steam-powered motion. Yet behind this powerful symphony was a brutal truth. The workers who made this miracle possible lived some of the hardest lives in American history, laboring 12 to 14 hours a day in dangerous conditions, with no safety laws, no age limits, and no guarantees they would return home alive. Immigrant children worked beside adults. Black Americans who fled the oppression of the South struggled to find fair wages, and women who entered factories faced exploitation and discrimination. But despite the hardship, millions pressed forward because they believed in something greater, an opportunity to reshape their destiny in a country finally rising from war. At the same time, America saw an explosion of ideas unlike any it had ever witnessed, as inventors, dreamers, and risk-takers stepped into the spotlight. Thomas Edison electrified the nation with the light bulb and transformed communication with the phonograph. Alexander Graham Bell connected voices across miles with the telephone. George Westinghouse, Nikola Tesla, and countless unsung engineers reshaped electricity, power, and machinery. And Henry Ford watched closely, preparing to revolutionize transportation in the next century. New cities erupted into life: Chicago, Pittsburgh, New York, becoming towering symbols of ambition, filled with steam engines, elevated trains, streetcars, and factories that never slept. The skyline itself changed as steel allowed buildings to rise higher than anything Americans had ever imagined, giving birth to the early ancestors of skyscrapers. Meanwhile, Wall Street surged with industrial wealth, creating powerful businessmen. Some called them captains of industry, others called them robber barons. Carnegie, Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, Morgan, figures who dominated oil, steel, banking, and railroads with relentless ambition, building empires so vast they reshaped the entire economy. And yet, beneath the wealth and power, millions of workers struggled for survival, and the divide between rich and poor grew wider with every passing year. This tension eventually sparked labor movements, strikes, and protests. The Great Railroad Strike of 1877 erupted into violence. The Haymarket Affair shook Chicago, factory uprisings spread across states, and unions began forming to demand rights, safety, and dignity, planting the earliest seeds of the labor protections Americans would one day take for granted. Still, despite the turmoil, hope pulsed through the air. a belief that America was on the edge of something extraordinary, that even though the wounds of Reconstruction were still fresh, the nation could reinvent itself through the relentless force of industry. Freed slaves who moved north searched for new beginnings in factories and railroads. Immigrants from Europe, Asia, and beyond filled crowded ships, risking everything for a chance at the American dream. Rural farmers left fields for booming cities, and inventors worked late into the night, sketching ideas that would shape the next century. Every piece of the nation, every worker, every machine, every spark of innovation fed into a rising storm of change, and by the time the 19th century neared its end, America stood transformed from a post-war country into a global industrial giant, ready to define the modern era. But progress came with a price: polluted cities, dangerous labor, corruption, poverty, child exploitation, discriminatory hiring, and a constant battle for equality between old prejudices and new opportunities. Yet even in the darkness of overcrowded tenements and smoky skies, millions believed that the struggle was worth it, because for the first time in history, ordinary people, not kings, not aristocrats, not conquerors, were driving the creation of a new world, and that world was only just beginning. Yet as the 19th century pushed forward with unstoppable velocity, America realized that the industrial age was not merely an era of machines, but an era of transformation that touched every corner of life, shaping the nation's identity, its power, and its moral battles. For as factories rose and railroads conquered vast distances, a new America emerged, one that was more connected, more ambitious, and more complex than ever before. The sweeping urban landscapes of cities like New York, Chicago, Detroit, and Pittsburgh grew louder with each passing year. Smokestacks painted the sky in permanent gray. The constant thunder of machinery filled the air, and the streets became rivers of workers hurrying between cramped tenements and towering industrial complexes, all driven by the promise, real or imagined, of a better life. It was an era when opportunity seemed endless, yet out of reach for many, when wealth broke records while poverty spread through the shadows, when innovation soared like a rocket even as human suffering anchored millions to brutal conditions, reminding the world that progress always comes with a price. In the alleys behind glorious new buildings, children shivered in dark rooms while their parents labored beyond human endurance. In the booming stock exchanges, fortunes shifted like storms, giving rise to tycoons whose influence rivaled governments. And in the factories themselves, workers breathed dust, smoke, and danger with every minute on the clock. Still, they endured because the industrial age was also the age of dreams, and for all its brutal realities, it carried within it a fire that millions believed could reshape their lives and rewrite their destinies. By the 1880s, electricity began illuminating city blocks, replacing the dim glow of gas lamps with a new kind of magic that turned night into day and allowed factories to operate without pause. The telephone connected distant towns, letting voices travel across copper wires as though distances no longer mattered. Department stores emerged, giving birth to modern shopping. The typewriter transformed business. Cameras captured life as it happened. Elevators lifted humanity skyward. The nation's imagination expanded with every new invention, and for a moment, America felt invincible, as though no obstacle could restrain its thunderous march into the future. But beneath this dazzling progress, conflicts brewed, between labor and capital, between immigrants and natives, between African Americans seeking rights and systems designed to suppress them, between women demanding equality and a world not ready to grant it. Each conflict became a thread woven into the fabric of the industrial age, revealing a nation rising on steel foundations, yet still figuring out how to treat its people with justice, fairness, and dignity. Immigration surged as never before, and Ellis Island became a symbol of hope and hardship, where millions stood in long lines with tired eyes, clutching dreams in their hands as inspectors evaluated their fate. Some were welcomed, others were turned away. Many who entered found themselves living in overcrowded tenements, working in factories that pushed human limits to the brink. And yet these immigrants, Italians, Germans, Irish, Jews, Chinese, and countless others, became the lifeblood of American industry, shaping railroads, mills, workshops, and construction sites with relentless determination. Meanwhile, African Americans, seeking refuge from the oppression of the South, moved into northern cities where opportunity existed, but discrimination still followed them like a shadow. They carved out communities, built churches, opened businesses, and contributed to industries that relied on their labor, but rarely acknowledged their worth. This struggle for belonging across races, cultures, and classes became the silent engine of the industrial age, fueling both progress and conflict in